Hello everyone, welcome to my strategy application blog. Today we're going to be doing some talking to the text exercise using the biology article Hidden Allies, Trees and Fungi. Specifically, we're going to be covering the introductory section, that first paragraph, and then in the next section, the first two paragraphs of that. So it should only look like this. There's more to the article, but I've decided to cut it there for the sake of time for the video. So, the first sentence, in a new study published in Ecology Letters. Ecology Letters is in italics, and students won't know what that is, but I think it's safe to assume that it's a journal because it's the name of some publication, because it's in italics. So I wrote a note there, said journal, question mark. Moving on from that, Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology, University of Kiel, Germany. Report on the influence of an endophytic fungus of the genus Clendosporium. So endophytic, students probably won't know what that is, but we can break it down into smaller words, into its roots, to try and determine the definition. Endophytic, endo, students might know endoskeleton. Endo means inside. And phytic. Now phytic, students are probably less familiar with that root word, but as we go further into the article, we will find out what it means. Just know that endo means inside. Make a note of that. Endophytic fungus. On the defense of black poplars against herbivorous insects. Black poplars. Now, it doesn't explicitly say that it's a tree, but we can assume it's a tree because the article is about trees and fungus. We've covered the fungus, and black poplars, as some students may know, poplar is a kind of tree. And its defense against herbivorous insects. Herbivore, herbivorous. Students probably know this already. Works the same as carnivore, which means meat eating. Herbivorous is plant eating. The fungus which lives inside the leaves. Now there's a definition for endophytic. Endophytic means inside leaves, or inside plants specifically. Not only increases the production of defensive substances in the trees, but also produces an alkaloid itself. Alkaloid, I underlined, that is a chemistry term, more than a biology term, and students probably won't know what it is. There's no real root word to it, at least not within the common knowledge. And so you would underline this, and I would say ask a teacher once you're done reading. It's not crucial that you understand what an alkaloid is for this part. The research team has shown in field studies that the presence of the fungus influences the composition of insect communities in young black poplars. For example, aphids living on the trees. That one I've also marked, aphids living on the trees, because that is an example of a herbivorous insect. Students might not know what an aphid is, but they can make a conclusion since we're talking about fungus, trees, and herbivorous insects. Aphids living on the trees, likely the only one of those groups that can live on trees, other than the fungus that lives in trees and the trees themselves. May excrete the fungus's defense substance in their honeydew and therefore be less visited by ants, another insect. So, on this next section, says endophytes, a plant's friends or foes. This one, it's a heading for the next section. It'll go into detail specifically about endophytes. So here's a proper definition for students who made the conclusion earlier. Endophytes are microorganisms that live inside plants. Endo, inside, phytes, plants, phytics. Some of these organisms, mostly bacteria or fungi, make the plant sick. Others have no harmful effects on the plants, and others are even beneficial. Previous studies of endophytic fungi. Previous studies means that we know that there's a bigger picture to this. It's not just this study. Previous studies of endophytic fungi living inside certain grasses have shown that these fungi provide the grasses with a defense against predators. So this study was made with the idea that it's possible an endophytic fungi could do the same to trees. They're both plants. Students, of course, are familiar with grasses. And for predators, you might want to underline that, because what is a predator in this instance? It's more than just herbivorous insects, which is the go-to, is the focus of this article. Could also be something like a deer that eats plants. However, little has been known about whether this is also true for trees. Current study investigated the influence of the endophytic fungus of the genus Clendosporium. That's the name of the endophytic fungus that we're looking at. Might be important to underline that. If it's mentioned again, we'll know that that is the endophytic fungus. Herbivore defense of the black poplar, as well as the effects of the insect communities that live in poplars. Okay, so black poplar, might as well just annotate that again. tree, in case students aren't aware. It is almost certainly a tree at this point, given the context that we have. We've investigated the influence of the endophyte on the chemical defense of black poplars. Endophyte, we know, endophytic fungus. When he says of the endophyte, it's a shorthand for the endophytic fungus, Cladosporium. Consequences for the food preference and fitness of the herbivorous insects. Fitness, in common usage, fitness can mean like strength, physical ability. In biology specifically, students might already know this, but I would recommend underlining it anyways. From a student's perspective, what is fitness? We know that fitness is like the ability to reproduce, to pass on genes to the next generation. But most students probably will take it at face value, the fitness that we're all common with. It was the composition of the insect community on young trees in the field. We already knew from previous studies that plant pathogenic rust fungi are beneficial to herbivorous insects. Now, I circled that, beneficial to herbivorous insects, because that might confuse students. Right in the middle of this, talking about how this fungus defends against insects, it talks about how there's another separate fungus that helps insects. So there's two kinds of fungus that live within other organisms and provide benefits. It's in the middle of a paragraph. It doesn't really relate to the other stuff other than showing that fungus can have interactions with all kinds of organisms. I would circle that, put a question mark next to it. That's probably something that you're going to want to look into later, even though it's not specifically the issue that we're dealing with. Now for the last part. We are interested in an endophytic fungus whose role in poplar insect interactions is still largely unexplored. Says first author Christian Walther. This whole thing was a quote. Christian Walther is one of the names of the authors of the article of the research paper that produced this, explaining the starting point of the study. All right, that's all the time we have. I think that helped a lot, looking at it from a student's perspective, and I'm going to call it there.